Alright, cool. Hey, how's it going? What's up? Alright, I've never done one of these things before, so what I think I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put up a picture, and just do it like the standard way that people do it, because I don't have any other better ideas. So, Laci, of course, did this video, kind of responding to her earlier video about the red pill, and I figured I'd just kind of respond to it for once. I'm not going to start right in the beginning. I'm going to jump in past the introduction, because there's not really much for me to talk about, because she's just kind of talking about stuff that's happened in the last 2 weeks. So let's just dive in.
I'll start with the feminist side of things. For a while, some of the more fringy aspects of feminism that can be found online have given me pause. I started my channel to share sexuality information, to talk about sexual politics and so on, but over time, just talking about that became harder and harder. It's gotten to the point where, the simplest topics in sex ed, the simplest language even, like male and female, they incite outrage in some people.
This is part of the reason why I don't recommend that people who criticize the feminist movement also hold up the feminist title. As you have noted, Laci, feminists are quick to come down on each other. A house divided against itself cannot stand, so why try and hold it up?
I did and will continue to do my best to, accommodate people's needs and requests and to respect the feminist conversation, except when it doesn't make any sense. Being anti-science, part of this. Antis would be fair to say, well, you know what, this is where you went wrong, you pandering asshole. But I don't see this as pandering. To me, this kind of stuff, being sensitive and considerate, it's just like a good thing to do, and I try to do it to the best that I can, but it got to this point where, at one point I'm listening to like 1 million different people's feelings on this stuff. It got unhealthy, okay? Like, I was obsessing over every word that came out of my mouth, every way I could be misconstrued or accidentally cause harm, and even then, there have always been people who seem determined to misconstrue what I say no matter what.
I guess it's probably obvious to you at this point, but it's not possible to hold up that kind of standard. No matter what you say, there's always going to be lots of people who react negatively to you and dislike you because of it. You can't go around trying to keep everyone happy, even on a micro scale. Instead, it would be better to speak the truth and let those who react negatively do so.
To those of you who've been asking, does this mean you're not a feminist anymore? I will always be a feminist. I believe in social justice. I believe in the issues that I've talked about and the causes that I've campaigned for. That is why I'm here. It's because I know who I am and what I stand for. And I know that this kind of shit isn't it.
Now, I really don't care what you decide to call yourself, Laci, but going forward, I do ask that you at least continue to speak out against the things that you do think are wrong. If you continue to call yourself a feminist, at least try to clean your side of the aisle. Again, I don't recommend that you stay with feminism, but that's up to you.
In the background of all of this for me was the antis. Now, I mentioned in my last video that the conversation's a little bit hostile. And when I say hostile, I'm not referring to people being offensive or taking the piss. Based on some of the reactions and questions that I've gotten from the anti-side, a lot of people don't seem to understand that I experienced that side of the conversation in the context of pretty intense harassment. And anytime I've so much as hinted about this to this crowd, to let them know, like, hey, I want to talk to you, but like, look what's going on. People have slammed me and accused me of playing the victim and trying to garner sympathy, being manipulative and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, at what point do I get to be a human being who is talking about a real experience that I'm having?
Now, I'm not going to excuse any genuine harassment that's been going on, but Laci, the reason that us on the anti-feminist side are, at best, skeptical of harassment claims by feminists is because of the many times that we have seen false claims of harassment. An obvious example of this is, I'm going to pronounce this name incorrectly, Zarna Joshi, claiming that she was being harassed by, as we've called him, Hugh Mungus.
Humongous.
Humongous what?
Humongous.
Humongous what?
That's what it is.
Humongous what? Is that sexual harassment?
No, it's humongous.
Then why did you say that to me?
That's my name.
What? Humongous what?
Humongous what?
Humongous what? Is that sexual harassment? Is that what you just did when you said that to me?
What, humongous?
Why would you say that to me?
Yes, but my name.
Why would you say that to me?
Why would I say it to
Why
you?
would you say that to me?
Why would you ask me my name?
What? Humongous what? Humongous what?
No, they said that they already made one.
Humongous what? Humongous what? Which person just wrote to me in a sexually harassing?
We've also seen feminists avoiding our point of view by insisting that we're harassing them. This is something that we saw throughout Gamergate. It's hard to have a conversation about harassment when you are so used to being accused of harassment for everything that you say. Now, she continues to talk about harassment from the anti-feminist side. I really don't have much to add other than what I've already said. I don't condone harassment, but it's hard to believe someone when you're so used to accusations. Not saying that these are necessarily false things that she's talking about, but like I said before, conversation is a bit difficult when we're so used to this kind of interaction. Let's go on.
I think that my experience speaks to some of the darker sides of the extremism and polarization that has blossomed on the internet in the last few years. The extremism in each camp tends to be the loudest, right? And incites the most outrage. It makes people scared or angry or resentful. There's a lot of emotions in these conversations, and I think that's important to listen to. How do people end up all the way in these, fringy factions? That's something I think about a lot. And in my experience, one of the gateways is often some alienation. It's not that they're a bad, rotten person down to the core, that they're just like an evil misogynist or a misandrist or whatever. I mean, sometimes they are, but we shouldn't just assume the worst of people, or that they can't change, or that we fully understand them based on one of their opinions.
There's a great video by CGP Grey that explains this very kind of activity. I will link the full video below because it's quite good, but here's the relevant clip.
Hello, Internet. Thoughts compete for space in your brain. Cat photos, news stories, belief structures, funny GIFs, educational videos, not so educational videos, and your thinking inventory is limited. A thought without a brain, to think it dies. Now, we can treat thoughts as though they're alive, specifically alive like germs. That might sound weird, but stick with me. Thought germs can burn out because once everyone agrees, it's hard to keep talking and thus thinking about them. But if there's an opposing thought germ, an argument, then the thinking never has to stop. The disagreement doesn't have to be angry, but again, angry helps. The more visible an argument gets, the more bystanders it draws in, which makes it more visible, which is why every group from the most innocuous internet forum to the national conversation can turn into a double rage storm across the sky in no time. When opposing groups get big, they don't really argue with each other, they mostly argue with themselves about how angry the other group makes them. We can actually graph fights on the internet to see this in action. Each becomes its own quasi-isolated internet sharing thoughts about the other. You see where this is going, right? Each group breeds thought germs about the other, and as before, the most enraging, but not necessarily the most accurate, spread the fastest. The group almost can't help but construct a totem of the other so enraging they'll talk about it all the time, which, now that you know how thought germs grow, is exactly what makes the totem always perfectly maddening.
The lesson that I take away from this is to be careful when you're not engaged with the opposing viewpoint. It's really easy to create a straw man of sorts out of the other side when you don't listen to them directly.
Time for the camera to die. From where I'm sitting, y'all, good people do toxic shit. Sometimes, across the spectrum, myself included. I believe there is great value in trying to understand someone's intentions, not just their impact. Trying to understand the context of their beliefs, who they are, why they feel this way, and hopefully going out on a limb, making good faith gestures between each other to work toward mutual understanding.
This I can agree with. The trouble is, of course, that it's not the easy thing to do. It's far easier just to make a quick joke, poke fun at, or insult the other side. Taking the time to understand and respond in a calm way is challenging. This, of course, doesn't make it a bad goal, but we shouldn't be surprised when we fall short. Again, I'm going to skip forward some.
The first, conversation I think we really need to have here is kind of addressing this undercurrent of, grievances that overshadow the ideological conflicts.
Now, there's nothing wrong with self-reflection, and I'm sure that some of us on both sides have some personal issues to resolve when it comes to this topic. But I have to ask, is it all personal issues or isolation that have caused this division, or is it also ideological? For instance, if someone believed that feminism is all about equality, and therefore anyone who opposes feminism hates women, is it not that unreasonable for them to react in a very negative way to critics of feminism?
My question for you all, antis, what have your interactions been like with feminists and feminism? Is there any sort of, key moment that caused you to feel strongly against feminism?
Personally, I have not had any really negative experiences with a feminist that made me a critic of feminism. I grew up in a pretty liberal part of the US, and I used to spend a lot of time on Tumblr. At one point, I even considered myself a feminist. The reason I became critical of feminism, like you, Laci, is I got curious about why people opposed feminism. I found that people who were criticizing feminism, like Karen Strawn, had a better argument than the feminists did. Anyways, that's all I had to say, guys. See ya. I can hear gives me a star.